Warning, this episode contains graphic language, depiction of nauseating young love, freaky bug monsters, uppity elves, and as always, teen angst. Also, there will be spoilers for chapters 21 through 27 of Eldest, Book 2 of the Inherent Cycle by Christopher Paolini. Listen at your own risk.
Is this a podcast, or is this just fantasy? We're just two nerds and we love our fantasy. So join us if you want to nerd out. Time to start the podcast and see. Anyway, here's the show.
Hello, readers. I'm Dane Patterson, the host who also has the brutal and savage mountain blood of kings running through his veins. Palinka forever!
And I'm Jacqui Lanier, and is this a podcast or is this just fantasy? The podcast where one host is jacked on the blood of an ancient murderer, and the other one is perfectly happy with the blood of 1,000 basic bitches running through her veins. I will let you guess which is which.
Well, if you'd like to support us on Patreon, there's a link in the show notes. If you can or just don't want to, we totally understand and just ask that you please rate us on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts.
Yes, we would love your honest opinions as long as they are positive and glowing.
Yeah.
And always, you can come hang out with us elsewhere on the internet. Our website is at isthisjustfantasypod.com. That website has cool merch you can buy. And we also post goofy shit on TikTok at isthisjustfantasypod. And also on Instagram and Twitter at justfantasypod. That's us. It's easy for me to say.
Yeah.
It goes well every time I do it. And that means it's time for this episode's recap.
Yeah.
Any chance, Dane, you think I can get away with? In last episode's section, Roran did a bunch of vicious murder, and Aragon trained to be the world's most lovesick riverboat captain.
Nailed
Is that
it. Done. We can move on.
Well, okay, it was a little more complicated than that. And I did write a recap.
Okay,
Can I read it?
Let's do it.
Okay. So Carvajal, along with its new military dictator, Roran, is in a disheveled daze after fighting off the Razak. Although the villagers are understandably apprehensive about the prospect of having to continue fighting the Empire and its monsters, they agree that if they surrender, their fate is like best case slavery and worst case Razak's dinner. So cue the montage music because it's time for them to get down to business to build the walls. And after a chaotic day of fortifications, Roran decides there's no more romantic time to throw blood feuds to the wind and propose to Katrina. So ring the bell for the happy couple. It's our first engagement of the series.
Congratulations.
You did it. So the next day, rather than try to resolve things with Sloane and tell him about the engagement, Roran wanders around town.
As you do.
Interesting tactic from our guy here, and I'm curious to see if ignoring the problem ends up being the right solution, as it so often is in real life.
It's always helped me.
Yeah. But the Razak and Imperial soldiers are relentless, and they mount a fresh attack on the newly fortified village. And after fighting side by side with an unhinged Sloane, Roran rallies the villagers to push the soldiers back once again. But the victory is pretty short-lived when they discover a 10-year-old boy is amongst the casualties.
Oh, no, another niblet.
No, he didn't get it.
Oh, no, never mind.
No, that was only Quimby.
A kid is dead, Jacqui.
You're the one making the niblet jokes.
Supposedly.
Anyway, I know I say smash cut a lot, but this is the most smashed, I think, of all the cuts yet, from the devastation of an entire town to the peaceful travels of a boy wizard and his fantastical companion. It's kind of a mess.
It's one hell of a turnaround.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Aragon is enjoying a leisurely raft trip on the river from the mountains through the plains, and he's basically enrolling in his sophomore year classes at this point.
Yeah.
So Oryx giving him a new course in Brom 2023. He and Saphira tag team on Deadly Mini Dragons 101. One of the dwarven guards gives a special seminar in skeletal enhancements for fighters, a masterclass, if you will. And Arya does the ultimate crash course in elven etiquette.
That one's a tough class.
Dane, I think now's the time for you to find her on Rate My Professor and give her a piece of your mind.
Oh, that review is going to be spicy. Spicy.
Aragon also tries to get back into fighting shape before meeting up with the elves, and it predictably sends his seizury back into seizures.
Pain and beauty. You got to get in that hot boy summer body.
He's trying, and it's not working.
No.
Auric is able to give him a pep talk and a puzzle ring to break him out of his funk, and before long, they've made it to the edge of the vast forest of Duweldenvarden. From there, Arya escorts them into their first elven outpost before sending the dwarven guard back to the mountains. And now it's just Aragon, Saphira, Auric, Arya, and a couple of bonus elves hop in some canoes to continue on to Elismira. Are you ready to make it into the forest, Dane?
I am so ready. I remember, I don't know about you, when I read this.
I remember everything.
Well, we can just move on. When I read this as a kid, excitement was peak excitement. I think I stayed up to read this section because I was like, I gotta get to the part. I just kept reading. Who's his teacher? Who's the morning? I was just obsessed.
I think so too. Yes, yeah. I know I go on a lot at length about Schransheim and the Dwarven City. I think a serious rival to it for me is Elismira, and just I think a lot of moving through the woods of Duweldenvarden. I think there's nothing Christopher Paolini does better than a good-natured description.
Yes.
So I'm excited to get into some of those.
Yeah, you want to dive in now?
Yes, I do.
All right, let's do it. We're going to start with chapter 21, Wounds of the Past. Almost 4 days have passed since we're not going to get right into Elismira yet. I hope we didn't prep you right for Elismira, listener.
I'm ready. Yeah, let's go.
In fact, we read Wounds of the Past first. So let's smash cut to Roran, to borrow a phrase. The entire time, the town has been thinking about what to do. Like, how do they get out of this bad situation with their government?
Yes, it's a problem for sure.
There have been arguments, yelling, fighting, a stress-induced amount of drinking.
Yes, that's right.
Things are looking grim. And on top of all this, the Razak, having lost a bunch of men, have held back because, you know, that a frontal assault will be hard now with the defenses and being outnumbered. So, because so much of the townsfolk are, like, ready to go.
Yeah.
So I think they're waiting for new soldiers.
Oh, so things are like quiet, but in a way that's
tense.
Not good.
Yes.
Okay.
Rather than tell Sloane over this time period that he is engaged now to his daughter or work any of that out, Roran has been working instead on town defenses. Classic, like, work, stay busy, don't think about it. He's
this guy.
You know, Aragon and him are not very different.
They were definitely raised by the same quiet and strange man, it would seem.
Roran's just been doing a lot of chewing and staring. That's what he's been
That
doing.
would make sense, yes, getting more Garrow-like by the ever-loving moment. Actually, in defense of Garrow here, R.I.P. Garrow, I will defend you.
Yes, someone has to.
I think he really would have been pissed about this. I think he would have been livid with Roran, because Garrow is definitely like a stand up for what's right.
Yes.
Take care of those around you. Like, try your hardest to do the right thing at all times.
Yes.
Kind of a steadfast farmer type.
I think Garrow would be really disappointed, I think, in this part.
And he was really excited that Roran wanted to propose to Katrina, remember? He was like, oh, the family's finally growing. He was really cute about that, I will say. As weird as he was written.
Well, after that beautiful sentiment,
what next?
We'll go back to the chapter, and after the combat and danger, the town is looking for a leader. Since Roran seems to have plans, has been very savage in battle.
That's him.
And has taken charge of the defenses.
Yes.
Some of the town are obviously starting to follow him now.
Yes, this is correct.
They've also started to call him Roran Stronghammer.
That's right.
Which is the coolest name of all time.
Cooler than Dormnad? Justice for Dormnad.
I mean,
Dane.
Dormnad Stronghammer would be better, but Roran Stronghammer is good.
Not bad. Okay.
Yeah. Sounds kind of dwarven to me, but whatever.
But you love the dwarves, so that's probably why you're obsessed.
It's better that way. Yeah. There's also a lot of talk about what they can do, how many supplies they have, how long can they hold out. And they can hold out till next winter when they're going to start to starve because they didn't work, you know, their fields.
Yes, everybody's a little worried about the state of the farms, right? Because they've been busy felling trees and
They're not working the
murdering
farms.
soldiers and
Yeah, it's not good.
doing other stuff.
Yeah. So Roran makes a rousing speech. Children, mothers, the old, and the sick need a place to hide. He tells them it should be the spine.
Ew.
There's an instant chaos and no one wants to put their loved ones in the spine.
Yes.
Bad speech so far. Horse even brings up Aragon and mentions that that's where he found the weird stone that caused all of this.
Yeah.
Superstition and fear abound.
Yes.
Roran's whole deal is he's wanting to keep Katrina safe, and he mentions that the soldiers won't go there either.
Yeah.
So he says that they should go up there in this very place where Sloane's wife died. And very predictably, Sloane speaks out instantly against it.
Weird.
Yeah.
Not something we could have predicted at all.
No.
Or Roran, who knows all of this information very well.
It's so weird to me. But anyway, Roran uses the deaths of children and the fathers to try and move the villagers into moving the children into the spine. And this actually does seem to work. Roran convinces everyone here.
Yes.
Except for Sloane.
Well, yeah.
Yeah,
of course.
Which makes sense. I will say Sloane's an asshole and I do not like him and he's weird, but this makes sense.
At least he sticks to his guns.
Yes.
Like, at least he's consistent. It makes no sense
Yes, exactly.
for him to have this opinion.
No. But unlike this, he is set before the challenge has happened. So I can understand this, you know what I mean?
I do hate in a book where you get stuff like this where they're just like, well, I hate that place. And it's like, well, what?
Why is this going to come up
I think
again?
we almost felt like that maybe a little bit in book one. We're like, and he just randomly hates this place so much that he's willing to like sell Aragon out to a couple of murderers.
Yes.
You know, it felt a little weird there. But by this point, we're like, yeah, we get this about this guy.
Well, I think karma's coming for Sloane, so we'll see. Sloane and Roran get into it. Sloane says him and his blood won't be going up there. Roran won the battle, but lost the war here, I think, a little bit. He leaves to find Sloane, who left the meeting in a huff.
Yes.
After they argue. And Roran goes to Katrina and asks her, like, instead of going to Sloane, like, he's like, I'm going to go to find Sloane. Then he goes to Katrina and asks her to go up into the spine without, like, letting Sloane know, or even if Sloane will object.
Yeah.
Katrina makes the point that a lot of the other women aren't going to go, and Roran tells her someone has to take care of the children, and it should be you. She's very upset, saying she would rather die next to him if she's gonna die anyway.
I kind of like her in this section. I'm not gonna lie. We get so much more of like a 3D personality from Katrina, the most so far, and she's just like, no, I stand by my man, and like the rest of the women are gonna do it, so why the fuck can't I?
Yeah, she pushes back really hard, and I actually don't disagree with her.
Yeah.
But Roran the stronghammer's convincing. So Roran gets her to go with a silver tongue and a promise that if she does this, he will never ask her to leave him again.
I mean, I don't blame her.
Yeah.
He's pretty persuasive.
He is persuasive. She agrees to do it under these conditions and is going to go without Sloane's approval behind his back, which sounds like a terrible plan because that man does not seem stable.
No, it definitely seems like this is not gonna end well. That takes us to chapter 22, Wounds of the Present.
Ooh.
Just wounds on wounds on wounds.
So many wounds.
This chapter opens the morning after Roran has successfully gaslit his fiance into taking a bunch of children into a mountain death trap. And our guy is feeling pretty good about himself.
Yeah. He's like brushing off his shoulder.
Yes, he wakes up being like, I fucking did it. Until, of course, a bunch of playing kids, quote, disrupted, quote, his tranquility, which is like an interesting take on the sound of children's laughter, Roran, but like, okay.
I mean, I love my son, but as a dad, I get it.
That's fair. I mean, I thought maybe I related as a famously childless adult, but if you get it as a dad, I don't feel so bad.
Yeah, I mean, obviously it's not all the time. Sometimes when my son laughs, I am moved to tears with his happiness.
So it's one or the other. It's either disrupting your tranquility or you're crying.
Yeah, I'm either like, oh my God, you're sweet, or I'm like, shut up. Dad's I don't say that to my kid.
No, he doesn't. Can confirm. So Roran heads out to the center of town to start overseeing the prep now for the trek into the mountains, now that he's really fully realized his role as the military dictator of Carvajal. When Sloane sees Katrina among those heading into the spine with all of her shit packed, ready to go, he absolutely loses it. He throws her pack to the ground. He's trying to like forcibly drag her by her arms. He's like assaulting his own daughter in front of the entire town. Roran jumps in to pull Sloane off of Katrina, which well, I don't know, a good move on Roran's part. You can't just sit there and watch
I know, but
somebody get assaulted by their dad.
Also putting hands on your new father-in-law, like all this stuff's bad. Like it's just bad
yes,
regardless.
Totally. I would say that Sloane started it. It's bad because of Sloane.
Sloane's not great. He
for
should
sure.
not put hands on his daughter.
Yes. So Roran jumps in to yank Sloane off. Sloane pops off, saying that Roran has no right to interfere. And Roran picks this, the worst possible moment, to spill the beans that he and Katrina are engaged in front of the whole town.
I don't think that's a rutabaga move. That's a bean move.
That's a bean farmer move for sure.
Yeah.
And if you thought Sloane was mad about the spine, oh, buddy, he starts calling Roran every name in the book. Some of these swears are legitimately fantastic.
Yes.
I loved them. He steps in to the situation, Sloane does, because I think Roran literally physically threw him away from Katrina. So Sloane steps in to form an actual triangle between himself, Katrina, and Roran. And a very chill, very cool scene ensues where both Sloane and Roran call Katrina to come to them like a dog with divorced owners. It's a weird vibe.
I don't like it.
All I will say about that is I really don't like it, and I think we've tread well on the idea that Katrina is an object in this book with little to no agency. The one thing I like about the description of Katrina in this scene is that even though she's very distraught by this whole going on, she straightens herself up, pulls herself together, literally lifts her chin up and makes a final decision for herself, and she goes over to Roran.
Yeah, and the thing we can say is at least she's not a hysterical woman.
I have to go. I hate it here.
No, I will say this. It is nice that it does like she is. I think we're going to hear about this from Katrina later is the vibe I'm getting.
I'm really hoping. So I really, really, really hope we do something at some point in this book to start to clear up the idea that she's just being ping-ponged around between a couple of men who'd like to own her.
Yeah, all joking aside, the only reason I can make these jokes is because it's so... easy.
What can you do except for joke about it?
Yeah.
I'm pretty much with you there.
Yeah.
So Sloane, once Katrina chooses Roran for good, Sloane deflates like a balloon. Mm-hmm. It is kind of the description. I hate this dude, and it still is a little bit sad.
It's really sad.
He yells in front of the town that he's going to fully disinherit his daughter, take her mother's essentially inheritance from her. So it's like a Carvajal tradition. I think that the women pass down along the line of females in a family, your dishes and your china, and that's how you start your household as a woman. So it's really cool. Yeah. It's nice. Yeah. And so Sloane's not only are you not getting any sort of dowry, I'm taking your mother's inheritance, you are no daughter of mine, basically. It's not nice. It's really, really brutal. And then he walks away. The rest of the villagers erupt into just utter chaos. Some people are walking by Roran and Katrina, giving their congratulations. A lot of people are coming by being you bunch of dirty troublemakers. A lot of people don't like it. It's pandemonium around. We need to get you doing more voices. You're doing fantastic. Thank you so much. In all of this chaos, Elaine, Horst's wife, of course, is the best. Yeah. And takes Katrina back to the Horst's house? Is that the Horst house? The plural possessive of that? The Horst's house. So she takes Katrina back there for the night, and I did think this was a little funny too. She basically tells Roran, don't come home until a lot later tonight. You just go keep yourself busy. Nobody needs you right now. I don't want to look at you. Yeah, she's you've done enough, my guy. Yeah. After all the commotion, the climbing party takes the children and supplies up the falls and into the spine, apparently without incident. Basically. What do you know? It just is fine. No Yetis up there or anything. No, they start getting a camp set up, and Roran's absolutely awestruck in this portion of the book by the realization that he's looking around and he's seeing all the old men and young boys who are staying with the children. He's so nervous about how they're going to fight off predators, and he's dumbfounded to realize oh, there's some very badass and capable women here. Maybe they'll be able to protect somebody. And I'm well, Roran, get your shit together. I like you as a character, but this is a tough look. Well, the only thing I will say, it is a tough look, but at least he has the thought. At least he has a thought. That's true. He seems very shook by the thought, though. And I'll give you that. That's that. But he does chat with Nolfravel. If you'll remember, Nolfavrel. Yeah. Yeah, Nolfravrel.
Norfolvrel. No, I'm laughing at his name.
Oh,
because
right.
he's named Norfolvrel and everybody else is named like Sloan.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that kid, if you'll remember, the
Yeah.
one who viciously murdered and then continued stabbing well past to the point of death a soldier in a nighttime ambush.
Yes.
Remember?
Yes.
That 11,
Yep.
12-year-old boy?
Yep.
Great. So Roran has a nice chat with Norfolvrel, promising to avenge Quimby for Norfolvrel, that's his dad. If Norfolvrel, I can't say this name that many more times, if that kid will promise to protect Katrina when she comes up to the spine to the camp the next day.
Yeah.
And the chapter ends with Roran and the rest of like the advanced setup team, the advanced crew, heading back down the mountain and into the village for the night.
And that leaves us to chapter 23, His Enemy's Face.
I'd like a deeper read on that, please, Dave. These chapter titles are dramatic, and you're not really making a meal out of them like I'd like you to.
That takes us to chapter 23, His Enemy's Face.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
You know that's better.
After that chapter you just went through, Jax, it'll be hard for Roran to top publicly fighting a father, shaming a prospective wife.
That's him.
And assigning a troubled murderous teenager to be Katrina's bodyguard. That's a pretty crazy combo for one day.
Yes, I don't know what the cheat code is for that combo move in Roran's video game, but that's a lot of button smashing.
I mean, at least he got a lot done.
That's true.
He doesn't waste time.
Nah.
Anyway, let's get right into this chapter. Roran goes to Katrina at Horst's house, where she will be staying for the night. Elaine gives Roran a talking to, which is good for her.
Yes.
And then she sets him straight. Roran, needed that.
Yes. Definitely Elaine is like, what the fuck are you doing? Like, you had better have plans here because look at what you did to her. She is devastated. She has no family, no money, no inheritance. People in town, it's going to take a while for them to come around. So, you better be taking care of her. Otherwise, we'll all kill you.
Yeah,
it's
she's
basically Elaine's, pitch.
Yeah, it's not good.
I
Well,
mean,
it is good.
It's good for.
It's not good for Roran.
Well,
it's not a good
what
look
he
for him.
needs.
Yeah, it's definitely what he needs. But anyway, Roran goes to bed and Katrina sneaks in. Ooh, scandalous.
I know. I liked this when I read it. I was like, ooh, okay, girl.
She wants what she wants.
Yes, queen.
Brown chicken, brown cow.
Oh my God.
Anyway, it faded to black on that part of the chapter. Then boom, Rowan awakes to insanity, okay?
Yes.
A hole has been blasted through the wall where the door was. 6 soldiers are running in. A Razak has a sword already held to his neck. Katrina starts to fight them. And that spurs Roran to drop to his knees because he realizes they won't stab him and slice his neck and because they need him alive.
Yes.
Then he gets his hammer and he charges them in and he absolutely goes insane. He's fighting like an animal. And the Razak, who obviously are trying to take Rowan alive, stand back kind of shocked, I think.
Yeah.
It's not described, but it has to be because they don't do anything to stop him. And,
Yeah.
And we hear the sounds of Horst and his sons coming down the hall to help Roran. So he's like, I just need to hold out.
Well, I think maybe we've talked about this before a little bit. The Razak are prone to run away too.
Yes.
So if Roran's going absolutely feral, I think it makes sense maybe in their character that they're maybe let's let him tire himself out on our
I would say
human soldiers.
Roran's
first.
probably in his underwear, pajamas or something.
Yeah.
And there are 6 other soldiers and the Razak was behind him. So but also it's still a little, I get what you're saying, but I don't know. So anyway, instead of grabbing Roran, they grab Katrina. The Razak drops her out the window. And Roran gives chase and tries to hit one as it climbs out.
They're sneaky, dude.
Yeah, and it catches his hand with super ease
Ugh.
and breathes in his face. This was awesome. So Roran grabs its hood to throw it back into the window, and he sees the Razak. We get our first description, and it's so good. So here it is. Here's the quote: "A hideous, tortured face screamed at him. The skin was shiny black like a beetle carapace. The head was bald. Each lidless eye was the size of his fist and gleamed like an orb of polished hematite. No iris or pupil existed, and in place of a nose, mouth, and chin, a thick beak hooked to a sharp point that clacked over a barbed purple tongue." Fucking metal!
That's disgusting.
So awesome. So Roran literally freaks and tries to pull away, but it's slowly gonna get him.
Yeah.
It's like holding on. He can't get away. So the Razak is dragging Roran out the window with it. It like kind of seems like all hope is lost.
Yeah.
And Horse comes in and tries to pull with all of his strength. The big blacksmith like wraps his arms around Roran and pulls with all of his might. It's super nuts.
Yeah.
And before Roran can get back in the house, the Razak beak slices through his shoulder, biting what he says through the muscle. Ugh. And they take Katrina and disappear into the night.
This was like horrifying.
Yeah.
When I read it as a kid, it was kind of horrifying when I read it now.
It gets worse. This chapter is terrifying.
Yeah.
Roran gets patched up quickly while Horse and the boys gear up, and they all go after Katrina. They go to the wall and see Beer or Briar, the night guard.
Yes, I think Beer.
I think it's Beer. He has been stabbed from behind.
Yes.
And a passage to the city has been opened.
Intrigue.
I know. So they go after for Katrina. Roran's not doing good. They had to go a half a mile, so easy walk for Roran for obvious reasons.
He could literally be on his deathbed making it a half mile.
Yeah,
no problem.
I do this to get groceries.
Yeah, dude.
The soldier looks upset and ragged as the villagers sneak up to them, the ones that are working with the Razak.
Gotcha.
And they overhear the soldier's captain yelling at the Razak that half of them are now dead, and it's all the Razak's fault for being like really bad at their job. He demands a new commander, and he doesn't like one that is human. He's like, I don't want a monster fucking thing. He seems really to hate them. He even threatens to kill them if they do not like go away right away.
Yeah.
And this poor captain, this guy is killed in the most insane way. A Razak jumps onto him, onto his shoulders, and pecks him to death.
Fucking disgusting. The horror is up to 11.
It's fucking
in this
nuts.
chapter for sure. I also love that this guy is like just trying to do an honest to God, like, hey, is it time for leadership evaluations in the in the army? Are we supposed to be doing commanding officer assessments?
I'd like to do an assessment. Yeah, no, like all the soldiers watch as they lick his neck. And the Razak say they're leaving as reinforcements are only days away anyway.
Like more soldiers.
Yeah. And then like two barbed shadows appear in the night. Two smelly and disgusting creatures fly down. Dude, these are great too. They have naked, hairless, gray bodies that are shaped like large, starved dogs with unusually large hind legs.
Yes.
They have huge beaks and the same eyes as the eyes of Razak. They seem so badass. I mean, these must be the things that made the tracks that Brom pointed out in the first book.
Yes, that's right. When the trail went cold and they decided to go more financial espionage to follow the money.
Follow the money, right?
Yes, I really picture these as like kind of a greyhound with like hairless rabbit hind legs and like a beak.
Ugh.
Horrifying.
Then the twist, and I remember when I first read this, I was so shocked.
Yeah.
Walking to these foul creatures with the Razak and Katrina without restraints is Sloane.
No, Dane, not that cool guy.
Sloane clearly betrayed the village. Roran must look crazy because Horse starts to tell Roran to chill out. Like before Roran says anything, Horse is like, all right, man, calm down.
Yes. Well, that's kind of actually what was it Baldur did when he and Roran are on the hunt when they very first see the Razak have come back to town.
Yeah.
Baldur just like looks at Roran starting to, I don't know, just like all his veins pop out and he's like
green.
Shaking and sweating. Yeah, he's just turning into the Hulk. Because right now the villagers are hiding kind of behind an embankment or something. They were like trying to see if they could set up another ambush.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
This is wild.
Fucking crazy.
Yeah, it's wild. And finally we get confirmation that like they're trying to take Roran alive. We really see this here. It made sense anyway. I think we all knew that.
Yes.
It's hard to be like they want him dead.
Yeah.
What's the point of getting him then?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So like we finally get confirmation on that, and then it's just like what a chapter this was. Wild.
Truly wild.
So now I want to know what happens to the Roran.
Yes, I was just about to say, I hope you don't want to figure out what happens next because chapter 24, Arrow to the Heart.
No.
This chapter opens on Aragon really cementing his fetish with the elves, Dane. A couple couple of your favorite things.
Yeah.
So the Ellesmere entourage is still canoeing their way up the river through Duweldenvarden, and by all accounts, Aragorn is just spending days at a time watching his new elven companions, and of course Arya, and reflecting on all their habits and subtleties. So that's his new pastime, is just staring at elves.
Not creepy at all.
No. So Aragorn's in one canoe with one of the new bonus elves, Lefane and Oric, which honestly sounds like the party canoe.
Yeah. Sounds like a good time.
Yeah, the other canoe sounds kind of like a tough time. Lefane asks Aragorn about like the songs and stories that humans have been telling under Galbatorix's reign. It really drives home the point, I think, that there really hasn't been a lot of contact between anyone and the elves since the fall of the Riders. And it's actually kind of sad here. Lefane says the common stories that Aragorn kind of came up with, they don't represent the vast majority of humans' like history, culture, art. But when Aragorn mentions that Brom had told the story of the fall of the Riders, Lefane says Brom was really brave to have done that. So even he understands like what an insane thing that kind of was to do.
Censorship was huge,
in Gal's empire. And Lefane actually says that the elves themselves almost never tell that story because it's too sad. So I thought that was kind of interesting too.
It makes sense. Like most of the writers were elven. We are getting an interesting look, I think, right too, at the like just how much Galbatorix has done here.
Yes.
It's a really good way to do that.
Yeah, I think so too. And Lefane, it's interesting that he kind of goes to this deep place because up until now, he's mostly described as like laughing and singing. He's very into like art and music and stories.
Yeah.
So it's interesting that he has this take about what Aragorn like knows about his past and his culture.
It's a cool take, yeah.
Yeah. So Lefane tries to tell Aragorn and Oric about the death of the Elven King Evandar in the war with Gal. Brom was there for this, Lefane says, which is kind of crazy. But he gets sidetracked when he mentions King Palancar and like, bless our little bean farmer. He had no clue that the place that he grew up, his entire bean farmer existence, was named after a person.
He's like, wait, what?
Yes, Palancar brought the first large group of humans to Alagasia. He settled in Palancar Valley and they named it after him. It was at the time, I think Lefane says, it was the last resort place that wasn't like occupied by by elves or dwarves yet. So it was like, well, it was defensible and it wasn't like a total shithole and we hadn't taken it yet. So y'all lived there.
You guys picked that one.
Yeah. And so at that point, King Palancar went to work expanding like his newly set borders through wars of aggression. Humans.
Yeah. They were the problem all along.
It seems like it, I'm not going to lie.
Yeah.
So the elves apparently kind of put him right in his place when he starts to do this. And his lords actually went behind his back to establish peace with the elves. Palancar was banished, but he refused to leave.
Yeah.
Which is cool. So everybody left him.
I love that.
Which is a fun detail. I'm like, yes, humans. That sounds like us.
Yep.
His story ends pretty sadly. One of his sons murders him and his house descends into chaos, but apparently King's blood, quote, still runs in Therinsford and Carvajal. So somehow this war, quote unquote, it does not seem like much of a war, a little one-sided, but this war between Palancar and the elves led the Riders, even as like of a non-issue as it seems like, it still led the elves to accept humans into the Riders just to keep the peace.
Yeah. It
and
still did the same goal. Like, I mean, they got a benefit out of it.
Yes, I think so. And some elves still think that's a bad call. Lefane tells us they're still like, maybe was dicey.
I wonder why.
Yeah. Also, we learned that the Riders ended up independent on the island of Roengard after the fallout with the Elven Queen then about the decision to allow human riders, which I thought was kind of interesting. So that's how they ended up as a very separate entity from the elves in the first place. This queen eventually did get over this, but Lefane kind of wraps the story up saying the sovereignty of the Riders essentially ended up being their downfall. I think the quote from him is "Who watched the Watchers," kind of an idea. So this somehow gets them back to Evandar, who Lefane was just trying to talk about all along.
Yeah.
He was the elves king who ascended to the throne 500 years ago. His mate was Queen Islanzadi, who rules now. Aragorn finally realizes, after truly everyone else who's ever laid eyes upon this story, that the elves are immortal.
Yeah.
He's like, wow, you really live a long time.
I think it's just finally hitting him just what that means in the context of history.
Yes.
You know?
Yes. And immediately, the only thing he wants to know is how old Arya is.
Of course.
Lefane warns Aragorn that now's not the time for him to fall in love. Some sage wisdom, I'd say. Especially not with Arya, of all people. She's kind of got problems.
He's basically like, dude, no.
Don't be in love at all. Definitely don't be in love with her. But also she's 100.
Yeah.
It's kind of Lefane's take on that. Things are just getting unbearably cringy, I think, in this canoe after everyone's realizing that the 16-year-old is infatuated with this 100-year-old.
Yeah.
When Aragorn has the bright idea to change the subject.
Oh, good job.
Some tact.
Yes.
They talk briefly about where the first humans came from. Oric answers this one, and I just thought it's funny because he's like, south.
They came south.
They came from the south.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh,
okay.
no other notes. Cool. And they also talk through kind of the reasons that they'd be unlikely, like anybody from the south or other humans would be unlikely to support the Varden against Galbatorix. Because Aragorn's kind of trying to ask, like, well, if we came from somewhere, does that mean there still are some of us somewhere?
Yeah. I mean,
like,
he did do a deduction there. He
did the thing. So we're a little proud of him for that. But he's like, oh, we could go find them and they could come help us.
Maybe they could give us some help.
Yeah. And Lefane and Oric are like, my guy, we're kind of a lost cause, dude. Like they don't give a shit about us. They're far enough away to be insulated.
Yeah.
And by the time they made it, like we're all probably going to be dead. So,
Yeah.
after Saphira returns from a hunt, Aragorn can't help but bring Arya back up because that was comfortable the first time. And he asks why she's so emo, which is kind of funny. Lefane's response makes it clear that he reveres Arya, which is kind of a nice tie-in to like, okay, people really do respect her.
Yeah.
And he's like, she's not just going to like spill her life's worth of tea to you. You're a kid.
Yeah.
And that night, Aragorn hears an injured gyrfalcon in the trees. So he's been ruminating on all this stuff. I think he's sleeping kind of fitfully, and he just is like hearing some horrible cawing. And he wakes up and finds it, and Arya is there, and she shoots it. And Aragorn's like, why would you just kill that cool bird?
Yeah.
And Arya's like, it's too injured for me to heal. And I'm like, what? Aren't y'all magic?
You can use magic not on the bird?
Apparently not.
Okay.
For the record, I will say Saphira seems to agree with this and like understand the reasoning.
Did she say she agreed as she walked over and threw it in her mouth and took a look? It's like, good idea. You can't save everything.
I think she's like, I think Saphira's take is like, better to be put out of your misery quickly than to like live a life unable to take to the skies for like a winged beast, is Saphira's hot take on this.
Yeah, she's munching down on the bird.
Sure. And after that little episode, the chapter ends with another warning from Oric. A lot of warnings from the dwarves about the elves, but Oric warns Aragorn here that like help from an elf might be kind of a dangerous proposition so to watch out what you ask for.
He's like, be careful. Their idea of helping you might be different than your idea of them helping you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I think that's exactly what he says.
Oh, is that what he really?
We're like pretty close. He's like, if you ask him for help, they're going to be the ones who decide what the best way is. And there will be no like brooking argument with them once they decide.
Which makes a lot of sense from what we know of Arya.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm going to say me and Oric.
She's kind of a product of her culture, Dan.
Gross.
I'm just saying. It seems like this is a big problem.
There's a lot of ways in which that argument does not hold up historically, but we will continue. Chapter 25, the Dagshulgur.
I'm so sorry, the what?
The Dagshulgur invocation?
I think that's right-ish.
Dagshulgur?
It sounds right.
Okay, let's try this
Dagshulgur.
again. Chapter 25. The Dagshulgur invocation. Aragorn wakes trying to catch an elf asleep. Hasn't been able to do it yet. Super weird. Do they not sleep? Guess not. Typical elves, am I right? Aragorn.
Much like me, they do not sleep.
Yeah, seriously. If you guys only knew, Jacqui like does not need sleep. It's crazy. Aragorn is just learning about the forest. He is when he feels someone trying to scry him. He's like walking around and he feels someone doing it. His hammer protects him.
That's good.
But Saphira and Aragorn get a little spooked. smoothed out.
Yes.
They leave the river at a waterfall, and they have to walk by foot deeper into Weldenvarden.
Yes.
Saphira grabs their gear and moves it for them, and Arya laughs. Aragon even loves her laugh. It's because Aragon laughs because no one wants Saphira to take all the stuff. Saphira's going to take all the stuff. There's this whole thing. But Aragon's just like, I love her laugh.
It sounds like the beautiful sound of bells tinkling in the forest.
He has it so bad, dude.
Yeah, it's tough for him. But I do think this is the first time Arya's laughed.
Yep.
So maybe she's like been, talking to her therapist every morning, trying to track through.
She has like better help at night. She's like zooming.
Yes, trying to work through her big T traumas.
So they're about to get into small cities and towns within the forests of Weldenvarden, and Arya does not want them to be seen. Aragon has to wear a cloak, and Saphira must fly super high during the day and come back at night.
Yep.
I don't really understand this. I mean, I guess the queen should see him first, but so there is.
I think she kind of says that it's like an elven respect thing that they don't want to like be sounding the alarm that a new rider's in town all over the forest before the queen knows.
It sounds like the elves are high maintenance.
Yes, for sure.
There's an exchange here worth noting. Aragon asks what Arya thinks of the queen, and all the other elves get super weird. So there's something here.
Yes.
Yeah. The elven forest city of Silthrim seems really cool.
Yeah.
I imagined like hundreds of white lights hanging in trees and beautiful singing like floating through the air. Very, like silently in the background of the city.
Yeah, very, very cool.
Apparently this is all magical because Arya uses magic to stop Aragon from running away, and Ulrich is being restrained by two other elves. I guess there's like magic singing going on.
Yes. Don't they like wake up to that?
No, they're like just sitting there talking around the campfire,
okay.
and then that like happens.
Okay.
Arya says that during these celebrations, the elves sing songs in the ancient language with spells of passion and longing that are that are difficult even for the elves to withstand.
It's the ancient elven festival of Sup Girl.
Sup, girl?
How you doing?
They like try to beat the holiday season, but they were so lucky.
Arya was like, shit, I meant for you not to see the ancient elven festival of Sup Girl.
Yeah.
We're kind of embarrassed by the whole thing, honestly.
Yeah, it actually was really well done.
Yes.
It sounds trippy. It sounds strange.
Yeah.
Funnily enough, all the elves have to they're like silent because they're all like holding back their like horniness, for lack of a better word.
Yeah.
It's really funny. The celebration and singing, though, is to help the forest and animals grow and mate.
Yes.
This way, the forest grows much faster and is extremely fertile and healthy.
Yeah.
Ulrich is understandably pretty pissed. He says if his mind is messed with again, he's going to leave and they'll lose out on the trust of the dwarfs.
Yeah, because they're not just being restrained, like being held with their arms. The elves like magically plug their ears kind of, or make it so that they can't hear anything.
Yeah, and also like he didn't agree to the celebration magic, so he's like, I didn't get like a choice on that, and also you're now restraining me, and now I have to have all this other magic placed on me, so like calm down a little bit. Arya ends it by saying that she you literally will not be able to escape magic here into Weldenvarden, so like if that's a deal breaker, you should probably go home.
Yeah.
He does not, but he is pissed about it. This is one of those things where I'm like, okay, I get it, but also, Ulrich, chill out, man. I mean, it's cool.
I do get it, and I do like that Arya's like, I meant for us not to be like, I think she says like this close to one of our cities on this night.
Sex magic is high nowadays. Yeah.
Yes.
So finally, Saphira comes back and is also high from the sex magic. She says she feels like Aragon does when he thinks of Arya. I put down the book and just laughed. Really funny. This guy wants to bang Arya so bad in his head. It's even Saphira's like, you know that feeling you get? I feel like that.
I had no conceivable reference for that feeling you got until just right now.
Right.
And now I know it's gross. Stop doing that shit.
The next section of this chapter is pretty funny because they get some horses, but they get special elf horses. And because everything's better in Elfland, these are noble and beautiful, but they're small and sleek.
Yes.
The elves tell Aragon that their horses only give rides when they want to, and that he should be nice and not harm the elf horse.
Cool. Also, he doesn't harm a horse. He named a horse after his beloved grandfather. So
well, I don't know. Snowfire might tell a different story.
He didn't try to harm Snowfire.
These horses will respond instantly to commands in the ancient language, and these horses won't even let you fall. Aww. They can pick the best course, and they seem to be very smart. They sound very cool.
Yes. I think you're a horse hater, Dane.
I don't know. Anyway, we'll get to this. Saphira confides to Aragon as they're about to leave for the day that she is sad about not having a mate.
Yeah.
And the idea that she might never have one makes her deeply, deeply sad, which is
That is really sad.
it's really horrible. She says that she is alone. It's very heartbreaking, and Aragon tries to comfort her with the other eggs that Gabatorix has. But Saphira still seems pretty upset and worried. They have a nice moment there at the end where, they kind of comfort each other.
Yeah.
But, I get it.
He's trying to cheer her up,
Yeah.
and she's just like, it's probably fucking hopeless, dude. Like, even if one of those eggs hatches,
Yeah.
who's to say it's going to be a boy dragon, and who's to say I'm going to like him?
Yeah, it's one of the many
That's
dangers
fair.
it's one of the many dangers of sex magic. You start to think about things.
Get too existential about the extinction of your species.
Yeah.
That makes sense for the only sane living dragon.
It's come up here the only time we've seen sex magic, so it's very prudent.
I think it makes sense, yeah. That does take us to chapter 26, the Pinewood City. As this chapter begins, the Ellesmere entourage is wandering like ever further into the depths of Duwelden Varden. Aragon's funny for someone who's spent 15 years in exactly one place. Like, he's discovering essentially the whole world of like every conceivable new type of landscape. He's
Yeah.
on this like epic journey. And basically every time he goes somewhere new, he thinks it's amazing when he gets there, and then he gets tired of it like a couple of weeks later, and he's like ready for a change.
He's like, I want to go.
Yes, he was in the mountain for a week, and he was like, it's pretty dark in here. And he was on the plains for a week, and he was like, we're on the mountains.
He was in the desert, and he was like, screw this,
Yes,
dude.
he's in the forest, and he's like, I want to see something besides trees. You're like, Jesus Christ, get on your dragon.
It's the Goldilocks
Fly
rule.
above the trees, you idiot. Anyway, here he's in this magical primeval forest, and
Yeah.
the only thing he thinks about is how disoriented he is by the lack of mountains, clearings, plains, and, like I said, the endless expanse of majestic trees.
Yeah.
But for all of his griping, for me, the descriptions of the forest are, as per usual for Christopher Paolini, incredible. They press on towards Ellesmere. The trees are growing gargantuan at this point. They're 300 plus feet tall. They're getting further and further apart to allow space for, the canopy and all the roots. It's giving full on fairyland vibes.
Very cool.
Yes, it's very cool. Aragon is struck by the gravity of this place, thank God, not just complaining about it.
Yeah.
He is feeling like it's sacred, like untouched by time. And Arya gives him a final warning to be aware that he's entering the domain of her kind now. He needs to be on his guard and not stray from the path. I think this is probably nice of her, considering what almost happened with
Yes.
the Dagshellger invocation.
And this is what I'm talking about. There's nothing wrong with this is another rule being placed on him, but the way she's doing this is a lot nicer this time.
Yeah, she's like,
giving
hey,
an
my dude,
explanation.
some shit's about to go down. So
Yeah.
just be on your guard, maybe.
Yeah.
That'd be good.
That's likable.
Yes. So Aragon, with both his ring from Brom, remember it was like the symbol of being the most loyal of
Elf
friends
friends,
to the elves. Yeah. So both the ring and the Gedwe Ignacia on his palm. I'm not sure if one or the other alone would have done it.
Oh, wow.
From the way it sounds.
He's got both.
Yes, they allow him to pass by the official guardian of Ellesmere, the official gate guy, the official checking the list bouncer,
Yeah.
making sure everybody's outfits look good, the ratios are on point.
Let me see your ID, man. Come on.
Yes, exactly. This guy actually was pretty cool to me. He, I think he's like an elf prince who appears and disappears in a beam of light.
What?
Yeah, and has guarded the city's entrance since the war with the dragons, which
Ancient.
is forever. Yeah. So this this is the only way into Ellesmere, and you must be approved by
That's pretty cool.
by the lead bouncer here.
That's pretty cool. And
Yes.
he only let Aragon and Orican because they came with a girl.
Yes, exactly. It is Studio 54.
Yeah, exactly.
Straight up. Entering Ellesmere, Aragon at first thinks it's just like a picturesque clearing in the trees.
Mm-hmm.
In reality, the city has been coaxed from the trees, essentially.
So cool.
From the forest by the elves, blending seamlessly with its surroundings. Like I said, arrival to Trondheim for me. I love this shit.
Yeah, it's cool.
Yes, the elves start to emerge from their dwellings when they see Aragon, but mostly when they see Saphira. To be
It's mostly
honest.
Saphira.
Yeah. And after a woman comes out onto the path and sings them a greeting, they continue through the city with a processional of laughing, dancing, and singing elves. So they're all coming out, gathering around, jumping, frolicking. It's very
we talked about the mythology of elves. It's very mythology of elves, almost I mean, if this was
very
humans,
Mayday, very like Midsummer,
kind of like
but not
manic.
horror show.
Yeah, kind of like manic. If this was
bit,
humans, you'd be like, what is going on?
A little bit, I could see that.
Yeah.
So they enter a soaring hall like made of these giant trees that houses, it's so cool. It houses an assembly of what I think we understand to be elven nobility.
Yes.
With Queen Islanzadi presiding at its head. She's notably hot as fuck.
Yeah.
But as Kunu would say, she's got some pain behind those eyes. And not to be missed is her metal as fuck albino raven that sits on a rod she holds in her hand and just screams weirda at people. Arya leads the charge through this hallway all the way up to Islanzadi, and everyone, including Saphira, which it's described as a first for Saphira, bows to the queen. Islanzadi comes off her throne, approaches only Arya. The tension builds, everybody's quiet, and in the last sentence of this chapter, we find out, big bomb drop, Arya is the queen's daughter. Eragon's girlfriend's a princess.
Dun, dun, dun!
Of course she's a princess.
Obviously.
Yes, and that takes us to chapter 27, Queen Islanzadi. I'm going to summarize this chapter just right through with the last one because we do not miss a beat between the two.
Yeah.
And also because you hate the elves. This chapter opens...
Oh my gosh, I don't have those.
No. So this chapter opens with Eragon having like the vague self-awareness that he's in one of the most fantastical situations of his short life thus far. And the only thing that he can fixate on is that his crush is a princess. So even he's like, wow.
Yeah.
I'm here. It's happening.
Right.
And I can't think about anything except for Arya. And it's like, well, then stop thinking about it, my guy. If you know that your mind is like running in loops, just maybe don't.
Spoken like a person who can put their mind completely loose.
Just like pull it together a little bit here, Eragon.
So
funny. He briefly remembers Angela's prophecy when he hears this, because I think part of the ending of that was not knowing if his love for one of noble birth was going to like end well or not.
Yes.
So he's like, well, she is of noble birth, but what if it's a nightmare? So the elves are shocked when Islanzadi repeats the apology she gave to Arya for banishing her.
Yeah.
Which is crazy. Arya responds that she can't forgive the 70 years that she spent without her mama. And
that's fair, to be honest.
yes, it's like the majority of her life at this point. She's 100. She's spent 70 years like working at a job her mom hates.
Yeah.
And ultimately, though, Arya does forgive Islanzadi in front of everybody. Islanzadi apologizes for ignoring the rest of them in the meantime. Like she clearly had business to resolve about Arya. But she apologizes to everybody else for not greeting them like a queen.
Yeah.
And Eragon greets her. The elves seem impressed that he knows his shit. And after this, like, we get the quote, in his mind, he listened as Saphira repeated his greeting to the queen. And I'm like, has he been able to telepathically eavesdrop on Saphira before? Or like, can three people have a mental conversation? Is this new?
I don't know.
I feel like usually
This is the first time we've heard this.
Is it?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, I'm like, am I going crazy?
No, this is the first time we've heard her talking to someone else that he heard.
In his head, he hears it directly. Usually they like download each other after they'll have a conversation with somebody.
Yeah.
Islanzadi deduces Brahm must be dead because Eragon's there without the man sworn to protect him.
Yeah.
And is wearing said man's ring. And she asks that Eragon tell her his story first, followed by Oric's mission, followed by what the fuck happened to Arya after her ambush. So Eragon starts by reading Niswada's letter to Islanzadi, and Islanzadi admits for basically the second time here that she was just off her rocker to have cut the Varden off the way she did.
At least she's self-aware.
After Arya got, she was like, I flew off the handle. I maybe overreacted a little bit. And she does promise in front of everybody that like she's going to immediately resume supporting the Varden. Like no questions asked. That was her bad. A bunch of people almost starved under a mountain because of it, but like whoopsie doodle.
Whoops.
Eragon wonders internally while she's kind of going through this whether his new mentor might be at this assembly. He's kind of like looking around, and he asks Islanzadi aloud when his training will commence. The queen gives him the cold hard truth that while he will still be trained, unless he can overcome his seizures, he may never be more than a figurehead for the resistance. So I'm like, and she was perfectly nice about it, but she's just like, listen, my guy, here's the deal. After what you've told me, from what's going on right now, it doesn't look great, but we're still going to do what we said we would and train you. As part of Aragorn's story, he's essentially explained what Oric is doing there. So Oric only adds that he brings greetings from Hrothgar and is there to make sure that Aragorn gets his training. And Islanzadi bristles a little. She doesn't love the implication that they weren't going to uphold their bargain without him there.
I wonder why they might have thought that.
No way to know. But she offers her greetings to Hrothgar in return. She's not outright mean about it, but she's just we always keep our promises. And it's well,
okay,
kind of, as long as no one gets kidnapped.
As long as you're not upset.
So Arya then, she's up to bat. She spares no detail of her torture when she tells her story to her mom.
Yeah.
And the Elven Council is roused to vengeance. They go a little crazy, and then cue a single tear from the queen about this horrible story that Arya tells her.
Christopher Paolini loves a single tear. There's been a lot
really
of single
does.
tears.
Yes, that's an emo man. This was, you have to remember, Dane, please never forget, this was in the era of peak dashboard confessional.
Oh, yeah.
Very important. Peak spill canvas.
Yeah. Peak Fallout Boy, all of that
We were
stuff.
all crying a lot of single tears.
Yeah.
So after everybody is all done talking, Islanzadi decides this meeting's been way too much of a downer.
Yeah.
She's like, all y'all stories are sad. And she says that they'll let Aragorn and everybody rest a little bit before celebrating that night. And she claps her hands basically and makes it rain all these beautiful flowers. It's very cool. But before they all leave the hall, the queen doesn't miss a chance, which I kind of like. Everybody's turned on their way out. I think maybe only Aragorn hears this. She gets in a quick I told you so to Arya about I told you taking that job would lead you to some trouble. And I'm like, I'm sure that you hate it, Dane. I know you hate it, but
no, I was
that's a
gonna say,
classic mom move right there.
I'm glad that the elves are human, or you know what I mean? They resemble normal people in this way. It's kind of funny.
That's a serious mom guilt trip for me.
Yeah, a lot of mom guilt there.
Yes.
Yeah.
So Islanzadi leaves the hall to announce to the rest of the city that they're about to party down that night. Aragorn and Saphira realize that the Elven King that Lefane, bonus elf Lefane. They realized the Elven King he was talking about, Evandar, who died in the fall, was Arya's dad.
Oh, that's crazy.
Yes. And Aragorn's kind of okay, well, now I understand why
I know.
boo wants to really oppose Galbatorix.
Now I know why they're called mates.
Yeah.
Got it.
That's pretty cool.
All right.
So that night at the feast, Aragorn drinks Fail Nerve for the first time.
Yeah.
It's this liquor that the elves have. It's made from elderberry and spun moonbeam, and I want some.
Me too.
That sounds very
great.
cool. I think they say you can survive on it for a week.
Yeah, it's
on
nuts.
a trip, just getting a little drunk.
That's my kind of alcohol.
I
right
know.
there.
I'm that's dope.
Yeah.
Gets you drunk, sustains your constitution.
Drink responsibly, everybody.
Yeah. So eating, drinking, singing, merriment all ensue during this feast. Aragorn and Saphira meet a million elves. Every elf basically in Ellesmere is coming up to them processional style. Saphira loves this naturally. She's
they're mostly only talking to her.
Yes.
Yeah.
She's yes, my due, finally.
She's I am a queen as well.
Yes, exactly. Aragorn's pretty struck by the lack of meat here. Everywhere else he has lived, that would mean a lack of status or wealth to host guests and not have some sort of meat on the table. So he's a little confused. He also is a little confused about why Saphira is getting all the attention. No, he knows why, but it is funny. He has another thought. He's wow, I've gotten so used to being the one everybody wants to talk to.
Right.
Arya kind of explains in the course of this dinner, to the best of her ability maybe, why she kept her identity a secret. She says she had been cast out, which it definitely seems like it's true. She'd been disowned by her mom. And she said that she wanted to forge her own identity and purpose with the Varden. She wanted to be her own person and not have this burden of being a princess on her.
Yeah.
I think she also tells him that Brom did know who she was because he'd been in Ellesmere before Arya started her work with the Varden. So
he knew he was working with a princess.
Yes, but he kept that shit a secret, which of course he did. Brom has so many secrets still.
He's the OG, man.
Yes. And after Aragorn and Arya have that little convo, the albino raven we talked about, walks like the length of the banquet table, I think through everyone's food maybe, to approach Saphira down at the end and like reads her a lightly insulting rhyming poem. Which is kind of weird.
What?
Yes. This time Saphira responds to this. I mean, it's kind of goofy. It doesn't necessarily, it's not very important.
Yeah.
But the thing I think is weird about it is that she responds to him telepathically, of course, but the entire crowd hears it and like laughs in response because she like makes a joke to this raven. And I'm just like, am I fucking crazy? Has she always done this?
No, this is the first time she's doing it, but I think it's because what she is seeing is, unlike everyone else, the elves understand the dragons and that she's a person.
Gotcha.
So since they're treating like her like a person, she is responding to them like a person is the vibe I'm getting. And like they made the bond. So I think there's a little bit of like the bond thing.
Yeah, because I'm like, she definitely partied down with the dwarves. She got real drunk.
Well,
and
she didn't
like,
talk to them.
And not that I can remember.
Yeah.
Arya, after this, though, does tell the raven's origin story, which is kind of interesting. The bird had saved Evandar from an Urgle. He like plucked the Urgle's eyes out to give Evandar, an advantage in battle.
Yeah.
And after that, to thank the bird, Evandar magically blessed him with intelligence and a long life. But there were some side effects, which included albinism and premonitions now.
Dope.
Yeah, so it just like bleached all the way white, and now the bird tells the future. So they're basically like, mostly it just says like dirty limericks. But if it ever says something to you that's not that, pay attention. It's probably your future.
Yeah, listen.
You're like, what?
Oh, okay.
So as Islanzadi breaks up the party to show her guests their fun new abodes, Eragon realizes that an oddly feral like woman child he's been watching throughout the dinner. He keeps catching sight of this person, and he's like, "You're definitely not an elf. You look like a kid.
Like, what's going
on?
on?
But also you look feral, and also you look like a grandma." So he realizes that he has seen a being like that before, and this lady must be a werecat.
So cool.
Yes. So on their way out, he and Saphira stop to speak with her. Very briefly, they learn that she knows Solemnbum, which is great. She is bored by humans. So that's why she lives with the elves, which is great. And they can refer to her as the Watcher, Quickpaw, the Dream Dancer, or Maud. And they go with Maud.
I love that.
Yes. So the queen shows Eragon and Saphira to Vrail's old rooms, which is like a badass treehouse / eyrie reserved for the leader of the riders. And then Islanzadi heads out with Arya. She's like, I got to get rid of y'all for the night. I'm sick of you.
She's like, get out of here.
And their apartment is aggressively cool.
Yeah.
I remember like wanting to live there as a kid, being like, oh my gosh, it's kind of like they're in a big city in a high rise, but also it's a tree house.
It's a tree house, yeah.
Yes, with like a cool library. And the chapter ends with Eragon and Saphira exploring their new home and debriefing about their journey to this like incredible and fantastical place. They are, for once, asking some like good questions.
Yes.
Like, is it worth it? Has it been, what has it all been for?
Yeah.
Have they come to the right place? Should they be, continuing their training or going to war? There's no way to know. So they take a well-deserved sleep finally after their long but not very difficult journey.
Yeah, I mean, it seemed like a pretty easy trip for all the trips they've taken.
Yeah.
This was the best one.
I know. Things are like suspiciously good.
That can't be foreshadowing anything.
No, I guess we'll have to wait until the next episode to find out if, like, I don't know, the entire city of Elismira is like actually full of elf werewolf hybrids and they're all gonna attack on the full moon.
Yeah.
Who's to say? There's no way to know. What I might know, though, is a little bit about how to find a theme, Dane.
Oh, is it time for analysis?
Yes, let's get into this episode's analysis.
Nice transition.
I really tried.
It's time for analysis.
In this section of chapters, the main theme I feel like I noticed was the way like our connections shape us as people. So I want to start over in Roran's plotline. The story starts with Roran's plotline. So I thought I'd also go there.
Nice.
I've always been a rule follower that way, unlike Roran.
Yeah, he's not.
A guy who famously will not follow the like one rule that Carvajal has about engagements.
He's a bad boy.
So as far as our theme goes, Roran's engagement to Katrina is one of the only solid connections he has in the world right now.
Yeah.
So I definitely think it's an important starting point. And the degree to which it's shaping not just his life and decision making, but the fate of his entire village is really drastic. You know, and for her part, Katrina is clearly also all in on this connection, shaping her life as well. She agrees to let Roran send her into the spine, and ultimately she chooses to upend her life, family, her position in the town because of her connection with Roran. So the shaping's going both ways.
For love.
Yes, between Katrina and Roran. And in the big action scene here, I think we get a really like literal and visceral demonstration of this theme. Roran's connection to Katrina compels him to try to follow her out this like second story window. And because of this, the Razak literally takes a chunk out of him, disfiguring and like reshaping his body itself.
Gross.
Yeah, I think that's a good mirror for Christopher Paolini to be like, the ways that we're connected to our other people in our lives are the most important thing. Like they have the power to change you. I think another way we see connections shaping our characters in this section too is in the interaction between Islanzadi and Arya. I found this really interesting. I love the way Christopher Paolini writes like the quiet shock essentially of the elven assembly when the queen apologizes publicly to her daughter. She's clearly breaking a norm of their culture to do this, and only like the rift in her deep connection with her daughter, I think, could drive her to break this like huge, it feels like she's really making a faux pas here, the way everybody reacts to it, which I think is interesting.
Yeah. Was that, you think that's a cultural thing, or it's not just a Queen Islanzadi thing? You're thinking it's an elven apologies are rare in the elven community? Is that what you're saying?
I think so. I mean, based on the way their like blood feuds are, like the elven feuds can last hundreds of years. That is why our etiquette is important.
Oh, I thought it was a
we hold grudges.
Queen Islanzadi herself.
I don't think so.
Oh, okay.
No, I think the way the assembly reacts is like, oh shit, no queen would do this.
Gotcha.
Like, no elf necessarily. I mean, I think they probably apologize, but not in a way that just like publicly admits all faults. They seem like the kind of people who are like, well, I'm sorry you feel that way. You know,
I agree with you.
uppity. I think in a way it seems like the source of their falling out could also have been shaped by their connection. Like it seems like Arya's choices 70 years ago were not fitting of her connection to the elven throne in the eyes of her mom, you know? So like the way they're connected to each other shaped the course of their decisions to both fall apart and then come back together, I think. And like I said, Islanzadi disowned Arya, which is a huge step.
Yeah.
But it was only Arya's kidnap and ambush that allowed Islanzadi to be like, oh, I have been the worst.
Yeah. You don't know what you've got until it's gone. You know, they paved paradise and put up a parking lot. You know what I mean?
I do know what you mean. Yeah, I think they've had the bulldozers out in New Weldon Varden for a while now, just putting up King Supers right and left. I do like that after their reconciliation, though, back on theme, Dane.
Yeah, sorry.
Arya's update on her like capture and torture, this whole like sordid story she tells about Durza and the jail, and she's like stoic and brave. It's really well written. Again, like something that's very gripping, and you see the elves react. And I think the elves' connections both to each other and to their rulers shape this like assembly hall's unanimous, like immediate decision to like gear the fuck up and bring some retribution to the empire, which I really like. It's not just Islanzadi here who's like, yeah, we'll support the Varden again, whatever.
Yeah.
The whole assembly's like, oh no, you'll all pay for what you did to this one girl. And I think that really speaks to the connections that they have and like the relationships that they have within this community.
I think so. Do you think that Saphira and Aragon have any bearing on that? Or do you think it's mostly because Arya was tortured and like really brutally treated, or do you think it's that and they have a new writer?
I really don't know. That's a really good question. I don't know that we get a lot here to really say one way or the other. I mean, the elves are probably savvy.
See, this is...
You would think, maybe it's because they stand a chance at winning with this new writer, but also I think we've been warned time and time again about this like still waters, hidden depths kind of bullshit with the elves where they're like, they seem very even keeled, but under the surface, they're very volatile. I think maybe this is a representation of that more than anything.
I think you're right. I think it's very cool for the characterization of the elves. I do think that sometimes this disconnects Aragon from the narrative in these big moments here. And we've seen how his power and his responsibility are a big part of who he is and the importance of the dragon riders and stuff. And so I think sometimes, like when I read this section, I love that characterization of the elves. I do think it's like, oh, so this has nothing to do with our main protagonist in this section
I guess only in
which
the
is a good
sense
thing
that,
in a lot
like,
of ways.
Yeah, I guess only in the sense that like this is how our main protagonist got to protagonizing. You know, that's how how his egg got out into the world, how it got to him.
Yeah.
And like everything's connected. I think we talked about Aragon kind of being the center of the world in a lot of ways, having all these connections to all these cultures. 2 degrees of separation from Aragon. So no, it's not directly about him, but there's no way he's not. There's no way he's not tied up in it. But I kind of like that point of view. In kind of an interesting way too, I think the Dag Shelger invocation hints at this theme as well. It's a celebration of mating, fertility, growth, and I think it's an early but really solid indication that the elves as a culture are really in tune with the idea that our connections to each other and also to the natural world are one of the most important forces that shapes us. So I think that's kind of what I'm getting at with this like whole assembly, like unanimous, we're going to give it to Gal idea with the way they're so interconnected with each other. I think it's really demonstrated in the way that they're connected to the world around them, the way they sing for the forest, the way they, you know.
It's really cool.
Yes, and I think what we get from Saphira at the end of that, it's almost like the exception proves the rule. The fact that she's not going to have any connections, more likely than not, like statistics point to, it's going to be impossible for her to have like a species connection. Anybody who really gets her and understands her, like Aragon obviously does to a certain extent. She says that to him, but like it's still going to be important for her to have a full life, to have some sort of a life partner who understands her on a deeper level. And I think the lack of that connection is something that she feels acutely and feels like maybe she is not going to have a way to shape her experience or like ground her experience in anything without having some sort of touchstone of another creature of her kind, you know?
Yeah, no, it's making it more obvious. Yeah, it's definitely doing a good job at that.
Yeah, for sure. And I think for me, in a really prevalent and very, very literal way here, the last point to this theme I want to wrap up on is that Christopher Paolini like builds on this concept with the elves and their culture and this like important natural world connection as soon as we enter the city of Elismira. The city and its inhabitants are pretty much the most connected to the surrounding forest it would be possible to be. Like, they've grown from the forest has grown to like accommodate them essentially. Like, it's so cool. I love the way it's described, like, and it makes so much sense, I think, for their culture, and they're literally shaping their surroundings as those surroundings shape their culture. And I think there's maybe no more elegant and literal way to drive home a point and a theme than that. I think that's why, like, in the section as a whole, I'm like, it could only be that thing.
Yeah, they're one with the land.
We see the city.
The land is one with them.
Yeah.
Very cool, man.
Thanks, dude. That's what I've got. Dane, is it time for your deep dive?
There it is. Deep dive. Yeah, for this week's deep dive, we've got some new information we're getting about the history of the ancient humans and the history about the area that Aragon and Roran grew up in, and it's really, really awesome. So in the new POV from Roran's perspective, both of these things are reminding me a lot of another very famous fantasy series, and the best way that I can talk about it is to break it down. So for a few reasons, let's just get into this comparison. Can you guess the series that I'm talking about, Jax?
Dane. Yeah, we prepared these episodes together. I knew what the series was like 3 weeks ago. I think you read this to me and ran it by me.
That's a good guess, Jax, but it isn't. It's the Wheel of Time.
Dane, I didn't guess anything.
Yes, you're very close. I think that was a very close guess.
Oh my God.
Now, if you haven't read the Wheel of Time, I want to read that. Just skip over this little bit of deep dive because I'm going to spoil some things from book 3 of the Wheel of Time and book 4. And if you want to read it, I don't want to ruin that for you. So in the Wheel of Time, most of the main characters come from the same village called the Two Rivers.
Yes.
The Two Rivers is really out there, far from the monarch, and no one really travels to it except for the wool to get wool and Two Rivers tobacco. Because of this, the town governs itself and isn't really up to date with its country's politics are going on. The area is also home to a great past, the ancient nation of Manetheren. Yes, a place that ruled for thousands of years and had the most noble and badass warriors.
Yes.
But that was long ago, and the descendants with the blood of kings and the brave and mighty Manetheren are just simple shepherds, blacksmiths, and farmers. This is very similar to what we know about Carvajal.
A bit.
Yeah, and learn about the Palancar Valley in this section. Carvajal is really out there from further monarchy, and no one really travels to it unless they're coming for trapping.
Yes.
Because of this, the town governs itself and isn't really up to date on its country's politics and going-ons. The area is also home to a great past, the ancient peoples led by King Palancar, who settled his people here and fought the elves and riders in 3 different wars, must make them badass warriors.
Well, yeah.
They would have messed up. They must not have lost that badly. They fought 3 times. Even though he was crazy, this led to the humans joining the riders, and when he was overthrown, it led to a great peace in the land. Yes, these warlike people's descendants with the blood of kings and the brave and mighty Palancar troops are simple brewers, blacksmiths, and bean farmers now.
Wow.
Yeah. So this leads to a character comparison here. There's a character in Wheel of Time named Perrin Ibarra, and it reminds me a lot of Roran Stronghammer.
Okay.
You see, Perrin is a blacksmith, and he wields a hammer. Like the Stronghammer.
Weird.
Yeah. Both Perrin and Roran love their home and their lives. Perrin just wants to be a blacksmith and be with his girlfriend. And Roran just wants to be a farmer and marry his girlfriend. They both leave their hometown for a bit, Perrin for much longer. And when they return, they're different. Perrin because his adventure, and Roran because the loss of his father, his home, and his brother cousin. Yeah. Perrin is wanted by the White Cloaks, an autonomous religious night order, and they come unknowingly using monsters from nightmares, the Trollocs. Roran is wanted by the Empire, an evil monarchy whose soldiers uncomfortably use monsters from Nightmare, the Razak.
Yes.
Yeah, they both rally their backwater communities that are far from their governments and full of people that are salt of the earth into well-defended villagers that are armed and dangerous. Perrin is a raging animalistic wolf on the battlefield with his hammer, and his people give him the name Golden Eyes. Roran is a badass raging maniac with his hammer, and his people give him the name Stronghammer.
Yes.
They aren't the oldest and they aren't trained soldiers, but they both pretty quickly take over the communities as their leaders.
I think that's a really good breakdown. I think for me, and I read Wheel of Time recently. I think it was maybe the last series we wrapped up in book club before. No, that's not true.
Yeah, we've done
close
a few.
to second to last before we started. Before you and I started Aragon again for the podcast. But I will say you got one detail wrong.
What's the detail?
Well, Perrin's a blacksmith. He wields his hammer. Perrin just wants to be with his girlfriend. I think you meant his wife that he killed on accident, Dane.
Yeah. Oh, no. We don't talk about the show here. Get out of here.
Oh, I really took you for a ride.
We're editing that out. No. Ugh, God, that show. Okay, so why am I bringing all of this up? Well,
to talk about the show Wheel of Time.
No. So Christopher Paolini gets a lot of flack for stealing from other stories, especially Star Wars. And we'll get back to that again next week. And also from Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
My point is not about those two this week or about
Sounds
copy.
Suspiciously like haters.
Yeah. It is to show what is actually happening here. What is actually happening is the formula for the subgenre of high fantasy or epic fantasy. You see, there's a certain number of tropes and formulas that they mostly follow that is completely okay.
Yeah.
So Wheel of Time by Robert Jordan, his own admission, like when he is talking about it, is almost a straight up ripoff of the Lord of the Rings first book.
Yes, it was definitely a big topic of conversation throughout book club when we started Wheel of Time. Was like, oh, Mount Doom, you say?
Ooh.
Robert Jordan? Interesting.
The wise wizard came and got everybody?
Yeah.
So why is that? Why would Robert Jordan admit that? Is he a thief? No. It's because he was making a similar epic, and parts, no matter what you change, tend to hit the same beats. So getting away from it is much harder than it sounds. I would also argue that if some huge innovation in this formula was found, it is likely that it wouldn't be called high fantasy at all, but maybe something different. So you see, it isn't bad. Okay.
Yes.
The comparison I have made above illustrates that while some of the plot beats are very similar, when you expand out into those out of those details, they are completely different characters living in a completely different world.
Yeah.
There are different stories, but there are echoes because they're the same genre.
Yes.
And so I get to the genre part.
Yeah.
So what generally is high fantasy? Generally, I think of it as having three main tidbits, and I would recommend the article defining the genre, high fantasy. We will have a link of that in our show notes.
Yes.
Or if you want more specific academic and more like deeper reads, there's a lecture by Michael Joseph and a book by Brian Stapfloor, The A to Z of Fantasy Literature, and all that information and breakdown there. That will also be in the show notes.
Yes, full big bibliography from Dane. We've got a reference list.
Yeah. So here's what I would say: how to make it from there's not a like definition that is accepted by everybody. So here's what I would generally say: high fantasy generally has most of these tropes within it. Having them in the story, even when they seem similar, isn't stealing. Yeah, if that was the case, Wheel of Time would be called plagiarism and a total ripoff of Lord of the Rings and be denounced, right?
Yeah.
So my definition would be a story that follows Joseph Campbell's hero's journey that normally follows a young adult or child while they find themselves with the help of a supernatural assistance in a battle for good versus evil.
Yeah.
There's normally a mentor, a right way or law or philosophy or order to be in. And often this main characters comes from very humble beginnings, but are often connected to kings and gods or supernatural beings.
Wow.
Yeah. Making them unique and mythical.
Wow.
Yeah. Finally, there is talking animals or monsters, a long journey or journeys, and normally sacrifice or a cost to the main characters that must be paid or ultimately paid. Most importantly, it is entirely set in its own world with its own rules and gods. And I would probably add more, but when you look at it with this way, all of the heroes make sense. That seems that most of the things we read fit that.
Yeah.
Even Lord of the Rings is like this. It is easy to see Gandalf as Merlin or Harry Potter the Orphan and his 7 Horcruxes as very similar to Hercules and his trials, his 12 labors.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? So it is all similar because it's very similar story every time. It's pretty simple. Good versus evil, list of things to do, growth, mysterious background. It's kind of the thing.
Yeah, I think I talk about this a little bit like I probably did it a couple of times in the first season if I had to guess, but it's like we like the story. The story is good. We like to watch a character start from somewhere humble or difficult and open up, like get tossed the keys to a brand new Porsche of like magic or a magical creature or whatever.
Yeah.
And like drive it around, get close to crashing, learn how to drive it and like win a big road race in said Porsche.
Exactly.
It's a good story. It has a satisfying beginning, middle, and end. You like to see your character overcome challenges and grow and change and be able ultimately, hopefully, to triumph over what ails the world and like fix things and save things. And where that's subverted, that's fun, but so much connects back to this.
Yeah, and like also like they're all farmers, or they're all like orphans, and it's like because people like to see large growth from people who are struggling. Like that's like an underdog story is kind of a thing. So my point here is, it is okay and often fun to see these similarities. It does not mean the book is unoriginal.
Yes,
it means the book is truly one with its genre. Yeah, that's it. So I
think so.
That leads actually really nicely into the haters this week.
Actually, you should do your research, Have you even read it? How you pronounce it?
What are the haters saying?
No, there is an index in that, right? This is literally derivative. Copycat.
So this week's pretty light, and I had to say their points are all right. I don't normally agree with the haters, but I'm starting to get a little bit less angry at some of their irritations. First up is Queen of the Elves and her decision not to talk to Arya, as well as cut off the ties with the Varden when Arya has gone missing. The haters say that both of these decisions seem like very bad ones, especially for someone hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years old.
Yes.
It's a little strange. I think Paolini is trying to show some of the things you were talking about in your theme and analysis section. But I also think he's trying to show the elves seem stony, but as you were saying, passionate and hidden depths. Like you kept saying that.
Yeah, I do think that characterization has come up quite a bit. It's definitely not the first time we've talked about it, just because we keep getting all these warnings, mostly from dwarves, about how volatile they can be. But Angela gave us one. I think Brahm said something similar at some point before he got. So
I think Hrothgar says something in the first book. Like, yeah, I mean, this doesn't bother me.
I think it's a going theory. I think it's at least been well set up for Christopher Paolini. Would you expect more from like the all-knowing and like wisest queen of the like logical and placid super soldier race of the Empire? Sure.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Well,
but
it's one of those things where it's like, sure, I get the point. It probably should be that way. It's not. It doesn't bother me. We'll move on. Yeah. There's nothing to really like sink in here. Next, we have Ulrich and his introduction to the elves. And I have to say, I think I agree here. And this is from a story perspective, because like taken with everything else I just said, this just adds to it in a way that I don't think shows the hidden depths here. I think it's not about that. Ulrich was spurned, basically. His introduction should have been the most over the top. When you think about it, this is a diplomat from an entire country of people who have a long history of not good relations.
Yes.
Like history of war, history of violence. You need these people to overthrow your enemy, and they're aligned with the humans who you have now sworn again, like, to help, and who the dragon rider that you're training has also sworn to.
Yes.
So you would think they would be a little over top to show how honored they are that he came all the way to their place. And the queen should have talked to him first. And I know that she hadn't seen her daughter. I know that. I think a show that the past business with the dragons is remembered by the elves, and that their new and continual partnership with the dwarves is more respected than anything else. Then she should have talked to Saphira and Aragon, as they are now the new riders and have been sent by their human allies. They don't know Aragon. They don't know his relationship with the humans. They don't know any of that. And finally, her personal interaction with her daughter should have been last. Now, I only say this because we've learned how amazing these elves are and how savvy and old this queen is for nearly 2 books. And I get this criticism. I also think she didn't talk to her daughter for 70 years. And her daughter was doing very dangerous things.
Yes.
She could have waited 30 more minutes, an hour longer. And so this is nitpicky, and I don't think much of this matters, but I do think what the haters are really talking about is some of these characters, especially the elves, are really hard to like. And the thing is like, you wanna, even if you don't like somebody, like I didn't like Durza, for instance, in the first book. I don't like the Rozak, right?
I guess those characters are just evil.
Right, but like they're interesting and they make sense within the context of the world. In the context of the world that we've been given, and the great, wise, and long-lived, very smart people, it doesn't hit. And so I get this one. I, as always, say, haters, back off a little bit. It's okay. It's going to be fine. I don't think this ruins the book by any means, but this is one of the ones where I'm like, yeah, I see it. This for me kind of does a little bit go, okay, this section could have been cooler. You know what I mean?
I feel like you're like the people who get very upset on Murtag's behalf. You just love Ulrich so much, it's hard for you to see your boy get slighted.
I like Aragon too, and I think what's happening, and we will talk about this throughout the rest of the series, I think what's happening is there is this treatment of Aragon in this section that is very subtle. It makes a lot of sense, but he is our main protagonist. He's who we see the world from. And I think sometimes when that protagonist gets a certain treatment over and over again, I think it's hard as a reader, at least for me, to be like, I do understand the world. I get this. I'm not like logically missing anything. You've set me up to view it through his world. So I'm always going to view it with him in mind and his close people and the people who've been nice to him. And I think that's what the haters are talking about. But I digress. This is really not the biggest deal. I would say that I like this section because Ellesmere and what he does with this section is super cool.
Yeah. I guess I think I could see, it seems interesting for the haters on the one side to be like, Queen Islanzadi is like too passionate and like too carried away by her emotions, like to have cut off Arya and all of that, and then taking the same character who's like, okay, well, obviously she's passionate. Obviously she's already made mistakes. Like she's spent most of the beginning of this section admitting to mistakes. And it's like, I feel like it's not very hard to believe she maybe made another one with regard to Auric. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I just think
it doesn't feel like a stretch to me, I guess.
No, I don't think it's unbelievable at all, but I think it also is unlikable. And I think this is set up in a way that's like, gosh, Arya was pretty hard for these chapters. She's not been very likable. Now we have the queen. She's not very likable. And if you take that with some of the things that I think, you know, they solve the puzzles really easy. There's the magic that Auric doesn't like. There's this framing of like, maybe they're just too otherworldly for other people. Maybe like...
Well, maybe this is their like Achilles heel too. I think that's kind of how I'm reading it, at least on this reread. It kind of feels like they've been set up to be so superhuman, so perfect in so many ways. And like that gets grating for me for sure, that aspect of it. But when I see stuff like this, I'm like, well... maybe it does make sense why the elves aren't in charge of everything. Maybe it makes sense why they haven't like proliferated across the world. They're bad at diplomacy.
Oh, totally.
You know what I mean?
No, I agree with you. Like, I think it does answer some of the problems.
And they get in wars and they have to be very careful so that they don't genocide their own race. Like,
no, I don't disagree with any of that. I'm not defending the haters either. This is just one of those things where I'm like, I also find myself, as much as I enjoy Asmira and I enjoy the like he did a really good job with that sex magic part. Like it is really like mysterious and almost creepy and otherworldly. Like this section's awesome and this area is awesome. And obviously I like the Dragon Riders, but it is like our first meetings again and again with these elves is like, are they all going to be like this? I hope they're not all like this because that's all going to be a long series if everyone's just like haughty and it's me. It's like, at least for me, I'm like, let's move. There has to be one good one. So we'll see. We'll see. Maybe.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's all we got for this episode.
I think so.
Yeah. Well, thank you for listening. Make sure to rate and review, especially on Apple Podcasts, support on Patreon, and check out our social media at Is This Just Fantasy Pod on TikTok or at Just Fantasy Pod on Insta and Twitter. If you have any questions or you just want to write to us about the podcast, we'd love to hear from you. And you can email us at isthisjustfantasypod@gmail.com.
Yes, and if you want to keep pace and read along with us, which I'm assuming you've been doing this whole time, we're like 15 episodes in.
I hope so.
On the next episode, we're going to be covering chapter 28, Out of the Past, through chapter 33, The Secret Lives of Ants.
What?
Do you think ants are like a metaphor?
Maybe it's like tree fantasy.
Come on and listen to us next time. Find out what our deep dive will be. Thanks for catching our show.
Yes. I love folding my own laundry.
Ah, sir.
Yes.
Your unmentionables are looking fluffy today.
Thank you. I use Tide. Keep your clones clean.
You don't?
I get tongue-tied with Tide.
You don't launder with magic, sir? As you are a powerful wizard?
As I told Namaste before I ate him.
You ate him?
Well, sometimes me and Shrew can like to switch around a little bit. A little role play to keep the relationship spicy.
Oh, I knew the dragon was mad.
What is it you want? I'm
sir.
folding my very beautiful silky underpants. What do you want?
Yes, those are perfect looking pantaloons.
I like cheetah print. What do you expect? What do you want?
Sir, I have good news.
Yes, oh finally! Oh, I love good news. Okay.
Yes, your beautiful, beautiful boogie boys on their scary and stinky mounts.
I love my leather blackers.
They have been successful in their latest raid, sir.
Thank God. At Durza, I doubt it. I just thought, oh no, not my bad boys.
Yes, they have arrived back in Hellgrind.
Do they have someone kidnapped with them?
Yes, sir. Sir, they've done the kidnapping.
I've got the Roran. I've got the cousin.
Sir.
Yes. Oh, sorry.
It is unfortunately not Rutabaga Roran on this day, sir.
The Rutabaga boy?
No, it's not the Rutabaga boy.
Is it? Who could be? I don't give a shit about Horst. Who the fuck would you?
Well, everybody else gives a shit about Horst, sir.
That's fair.
You are alone in that opinion. That is a bad take.
That's fine. His wife's a babe. I like his wife. Aline, yes.
Well,
And that Baldur could get it. You know what I'm saying?
Perhaps it would hearten you to know, sir. Speaking
Yes?
of babes, they have kidnapped a babe.
No, a baby.
No,
We're
no,
gonna
no.
feed it to Sarukin.
No. A hot woman, sir. A hot woman.
What? Okay.
Her,
Elaine?
No, unfortunately, no, not the one
Okay.
you know about. Her name is,
Not the rotund one, is it?
no.
Okay, who is it?
No, this is, Katrina, the butcher's daughter. And the butcher is in league with us now, a powerful ally we've gained this day.
What am I gonna do with the butcher's daughter?
Well, you see, okay, here's the hook, sir.
Okay.
The rutabaga boy
Yes.
is in love with her.
Are they like 12 or 16 or something?
I do believe they're 18, but it is questionable.
I mean, he's not going to. He doesn't give a shit. I mean,
I think that he does. I think he only gives a shit about that, in fact. So I think what we're hoping now.
Okay.
Stay with me here.
Okay.
It's a bit convoluted.
okay.
We have the Katrina.
Yes.
The Roran will come with the Katrina for the Katrina. And the
okay.
Aragon will come for the Roran. It's bing, bang, boom, Bob's your uncle, sir.
Bing, bang, boom. Bob's your uncle. Yes. Just like in Tia. Just like in Gilead.
Well,
Oh,
you do
God.
make effective points, but it is nothing like Trondheim, if that heartens you, sir.
Oh, I'm glad we've got a butcher now. Because we can finally have someone cut you up the way you deserve. Feed you to Sarukin.
Again?
Well, no. I'm feeling inspired. I'm feeling
good.
nice. Yes.
I think it's going to be all right this day,
I'm
sir.
actually feeling good.
Oh, thank God.
feeling
I'm going
zen.
to leave. I'm going to go.
Okay.
Go
good.
out on a high.
You know what? You deserve that.
Thank you.
It's a me time. I'm just kidding. Get back to work. The fuck?